so let's move on to interpreting the meaning accurately. This is a really key part of interpreting, as all these sections are, but certainly one of the major roles or major reason an interpreter is there is to make sure that they interpret the meaning of what's being said as accurately as possible. If you remember, the final stage of an interpreting process is reproducing the message. So you'd need to listen to understand, first of all. You'd need to sort of process that in your brain, and then you need to reproduce that in another language. So what does it mean to interpret the meaning accurately? Carolina, what do you think? You're on mute, by the way.
To be as accurate as possible.
Yeah, so specifically, what do we mean by that? What kind of things would you expect?
To be able to translate everything. I mean, not specifically word for word, because it might not make sense in the other language, just so it all makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So trying to remember everything that's being said, trying to understand the meaning of everything that's being said, so that you can relay that without changing the message at all, really. So absolutely. So that's exactly what I mean. Interpret accurately and faithfully from the source language to the target language. And what that means is that as an interpreter, the process you go through is you first of all use your knowledge and skills to understand the correct meaning of what you're hearing in the source language, and then convey the message in a way that's understandable to the speaker of the target language. So like we just said then, you wouldn't be able to just do it word for word, because it wouldn't be logical in the target language. It would come out incorrectly. So you need to actually think about it and process that information and then convey it in a way that's understandable to the speaker of the target language as well. You must also refrain from interjecting your own opinion. And again, this is where it can differ from a day-to-day conversation, because naturally as people, people, when they're having a sort of normal conversation between two people in the same language, let's say it's between a friend or family member, you're used to probably putting your own spin on it and giving your own opinion and saying what you think about something. And you've got to have quite a lot of discipline as an interpreter to almost go against that natural programming and think you can't put in your own opinion. So you're not adding anything to the message at all or taking anything away. But again, just trying to keep it as close to the original message as possible. Even if you think that what's being said, isn't going to be understood fully. And again, that can be another point where it can be tempting to sort of try and embellish the message or change the message or add a bit more detail. Not because you're wanting to do something wrong, but essentially out of goodwill, you want that message to be understood. That's kind of the idea or the reason you're there. So it's very, very tempting to put a bit more additional information in, because again, you'll think that it maybe will make it easier to understand. But again, you must try and refrain from that. If the person doesn't understand the message when you've interpreted it, it's down to them really to ask a question of the professional, for example, or for the professional to ask a question of the limited English speaker if they need to clarify anything without you actually just adding things yourself. So that can be one of the challenges as well. Kasia, okay, that's fine. Sorry, someone was going to ask a question, and I think.
Then it comes to a body language, right? If they don't understand, we should be able to read body language.
Which language, sorry?
Body language.
Body language? What do you mean by that?
Body language.
Body language, sorry.
Yeah.
I don't know what I thought I was hearing there. Yeah, absolutely. So that's another thing. I mean, sometimes, and we've probably covered this before, it normally comes up a few times, but sometimes if you have interpreted a message and you can read the body language of the person, and regardless of what they say, you've picked up that they don't understand, then you might want to make that known, say to the professional or the other party, and just say, the interpreter would like you to point out, just in case you haven't noticed, that I don't think they understood what you just said there. And then you can again let the professional make that decision, because some people don't like to make it clear, so they might not question something that they didn't understand. And again, when you're working in different cultures, it might not be clear from body language to, for example, the English-speaking professional. It might not be clear to them the body language that someone is giving off, that might be really obvious to you that they don't understand, but it's not always obvious to the English speaker. So again, you can use that sort of cultural awareness you've got to make it fairly clear. I always remember a time when I was working out in India, that when I was doing some teaching out there, and when I first started teaching a class in India, I'd give them some information and I'd ask them, do you understand that? Does that make sense? And what they do, and it's quite a visual thing, they'd kind of move their head like this, and I thought they were shaking their heads to say no. So I'd repeat myself and try and explain it a different way. Do you understand that? Okay, let me try and explain. And after about the third time, it dawned on me that actually this was a different body language. They weren't shaking their heads. It was different. And then I asked them, I said, when you do this, does it mean yes? And it was like, yeah, yes, it does. Okay, there we go. So they understood it, but I didn't, again, because of my background, I hadn't seen that gesture before. I didn't understand it. And therefore it confused me a lot. And that's a very simple example how someone from one culture doesn't always understand the body language signals that are being given off by someone in another culture through no fault of their own. It's just that they haven't had that exposure. So yes, it's a good point to bring it up there. So in that situation, had it been the opposite way, and I thought they were saying yes when they were actually saying no, someone might have been kind enough to say, by the way, they're all saying no there, they're not saying yes. So yeah, it is quite important sometimes to keep
so
that.
Basically, we have to keep an eye on the body language as well.
Yeah, it can be very important. You don't have to, but it can be an important part of the service that you offer. And again, it will depend on the knowledge and expertise of the people in that conversation. Sometimes, like if it's a doctor, chances are they might have dealt with people from that culture and that language before, and they might pick up on the body language. So they might be fine with it. But if it's clear they're not, then again, you might want to interject and just give them a bit of a helping hand there.
Okay, so it's like an observation as well, just to make sure.
Exactly, yeah. If the
how the clients feel and make sure they feel comfortable with us as well.
Yeah, exactly. If the interpreter's job wasn't already complex enough, you're also there as a cultural advisor, really. So again, if it's really obvious, and you wouldn't be doing this all the time, but certainly if it's very obvious to you that someone isn't understanding a message, and it's also clear to you that the person conveying that message hasn't twigged onto that, they've got no idea, they think the message is being understood, then you might want to, again, just politely let them know that, by the way, the interpreter's noticed that person is, you might even talk about the particular body language to the professional and just let them know that they don't understand. Okay, so we now want to talk about inaccurate interpreting. So we have a phrase on the presentation there. You and your partner can claim universal credit as a couple if one of you is under state pension age and eligible for universal credit. So it's the kind of sentence you might come across when you're doing interpreting in welfare. So for the Department of Work and Pensions benefits, which we looked at, of course, in the last session. So first of all, what I'd like you to do, just in your own languages, is have a think about how you would translate that word for word. So if you were to actually substitute each word for the equivalent word in your other language, what would be the effect, first of all, of doing that? So a literal interpretation. Flo, what do you think the effect would in Romanian of interpreting that phrase, that sentence word for word? Would it be understandable?
To be honest, half of it.
Half of it,
would
okay.
be would be understandable.
Which bits wouldn't be understandable?
Would you like me to translate in Romanian?
Well, I wouldn't understand in Romanian.
Yeah, honestly, to translate in English in Romanian, you kind of have to split the phrase in half, and then start with the second half.
Okay.
And finish with the first half.
Okay, so you're having to change. I think this is probably quite common for a lot of languages as well. You first of all might need to change the order of things.
Yes, it's a grammatical issue, not issue. But
okay,
half of it, if I would have to translate in Romanian the phrase here, half of it will be understandable and half of it no.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Patricia, if you were interpreting this sentence or translating it word for word, what would happen with terms like universal credit? Would that make any sense? If you literally translated universal for the word in, is it Polish, your other language?
Mhm.
Yeah,
Yeah.
in Polish, universal in Polish, credit in Polish, would it mean anything?
No, that will actually make sense. But therefore, for example, let's say for the second you within the sentence, as it refers to two people rather than one, like if we were to translate but like literally,
Yeah.
it would just there's only like that would translate into just a specific word for like meaning you as one person,
Right. Okay.
not as for
Okay.
example more than one.
Okay, so that's one of the changes. Obviously, it might be unique to Polish. It could be true of other languages as well. But yeah, so if you literally translated it, the word "you," if it's literally translated, would actually sort of cancel out the fact it's talking to a couple, because the literal translation only means for one person. That's an interesting one. Okay, so yeah, so that's one of the problems. And yeah, I mean, in the last section we were just talking about being as accurate as possible. But of course, if you try and be too accurate in a way, it also would muddle the meaning, so that it's not possible for you to do your job without making some changes, first of all. Okay, so look at the sentence again and think about the way the meaning might change if you're not accurate this time. So again, we've looked at it. Okay, it's not possible to do a literal translation, but even when you are altering it so it makes sense, you still need to make sure that certain things are still as accurate as you can make them. So for example, if you change the meaning from "if one of you" to "if you are," what difference would that make to the sentence as a whole? Amelia, what do you think? What would be the effect of changing that? I think
for me it makes sense in the very first place anyway, because there is stated that it's one of you, that it doesn't say that there is more than one of you, is one of you, you know. And if you are, I don't know,
it might not make
one
it.
of you, and you are what you are, it's like you referring to one person, so it wouldn't change much. I mean,
Yeah.
the ends of the words would change. The word would, like the state pension age, that would sound different.
Yeah.
Or
Okay. Yamin, I think you were going to have a point on that.
No, I just was having a question.
Okay.
You mean translated this sentence, its meaning but change if one of you two?
Yeah. So instead of saying "if one of you is under state pension age," you would say "if you are under state pension age." It's a subtle change, but it does change the meaning of the sentence slightly.
Oh.
Can I just, as I understand it,
Yeah.
if one of you means only either you or your partner,
Yeah.
or if I translate "if you are" in my language, we have two different words for you as just you, or you as two or
Plural.
three people. So it depends. Yeah. It depends. If I just translate "if you are" is just for you.
Yes.
So I have to understand if it's just for me or me and some other persons as well, because you have the same word in English, but we have two different words to use. Depends on what it's said, really. So it would completely change the sentence if I didn't understand what it really means.
Yeah, exactly. I think that's more what we're driving at there, is that if you misheard that or misunderstood it or didn't quite do it, and you made it so it means all of them, the change from "one of you" to in English, of course, the change from "one of you" to "if you are" is that they might think it applies to both of them. So that therefore they would think they would both have to be under state pension age, whereas in fact that's not entirely true. It's just saying if one of those two people is under state pension age, then they are eligible. So yeah, it does make a difference. Zaid, you had a question or a point?
Yeah, I mean, I just ended up with two different sentences. basically completely. I mean, because I mean,
Okay.
the first one, the one we translated word by word was too heavy on information and linguistically just flawed, just wrong. And honestly, I would expect a, what do you mean by that right after it? Because there's not too much to understand. The second one is more accurate because it's, I mean, we're interpreting the idea, not word by word, but it's just wrong. The information is wrong.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. Even with a very small change there, it means that you're effectively giving them incorrect information. So you're absolutely right. Okay, so adding to that, so again, translate its meaning, but if you just didn't include at all and eligible for universal credit, so the sentence uni partner can claim universal credit as a couple if one of you is under state pension age, what would that do to the meaning of the sentence, Kasia?
So you just want me to focus on the eligibility, right?
Yeah, so if you missed that out, and you didn't include eligible for universal credit, what would that mean to the sentence?
So obviously, if someone is eligible, they can try to claim it, but it's not given 100% that they will receive it, right? So if I say, for example, you can get or you will get universal credit, that obviously is not telling them the whole truth because, there is one fact being eligible and trying to get it, but they might not fulfill some other aspects of being eligible.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, there might be more to it.
Yeah, it's spot on. So it changes the meaning. So you're essentially given, like Zaid said a moment ago, you're not given the correct information because you're missing something out that's quite crucial. So if you just put a full stop after state pension age effectively and said you and your partner can claim universal credit as a couple if one of you is under state pension age, they would just think, okay, well, one of us is, therefore we can claim it. But the next bit, and eligible for universal credit, means there's effectively two criteria. First of all, you need to be under state pension age, and secondly, you need to also meet the other eligibility criteria. So again, it's even though it doesn't seem like much of a change, you can see how if you're interpreting and you're slightly changing the information or you're omitting some of the information there, it can make quite a big difference to the actual meaning of the whole sentence.